Hello, everybody. This is Lucas Skinner, and you're listening to At the Buzzer. I'm joined with Christian Sovereign today, and we are going to be ranking our top 10 point guards in the NBA. I based it off of Basketball Reference, so if they were listed as a point guard last season, that's what I have them as. So I suppose we can just get straight into the list. I'll say who I. Should we go 1 to 10 or 10 to 1?
10 to 1.
Okay, so 10th, I have De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings. Last season, he averaged about 17 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds, and he's only 21 years old. Who did you have at number 10?
Number
Christian?
10, I went with Trae Young.
Another thing I have to say about De'Aaron Fox is he shot 46% from the field last season, and for a 21-year-old, that is not bad. That is not great, but it's good. He's probably the fastest player in the league, and definitely a future point guard to look out for in the league. Number 9, that's where I had Trae Young. He's the point guard of the Atlanta Hawks, and he was second in Rookie of the Year voting last year. He's 21 years old and averaged just shy of 20 points last season at 19.1, with 8 assists and 4 rebounds to go along with that. His percentages may not show how good of a shooter he truly is, only shooting 42% from the field, 32% from 3, and a good 83% from the free throw line. But we know his three-point shot is obviously better than that. He could be streaky at times during his rookie season. Who did you have at number 9?
I put De'Aaron Fox. I liked his improvement from his rookie season, and I gave him the slight edge over Trae Young. Although I don't know if that's how their career will finish, but going into this season, I think De'Aaron Fox is the better player. His defense, I believe, is better than Trae Young's, and his shot, I've seen improvement in his three-point shot and his percentages overall. He's an efficient player, and like you said earlier, I believe he's one of the quicker guards in the league. And for a second-year point guard, he put up some pretty nice stats at about 17 points a game, about 4 rebounds, and about 7 assists, which is very solid, and I expect him to build off that this coming season.
Would you like to say who you have at number 8?
Number 8, I went with Mike Conley. Although he's been battling injuries over the last couple of years, but I believe he's still a very solid point guard, and now that he's with the Utah Jazz, I'd like to see how he meshes with that team after the departure of Ricky Rubio. He put up 20 points a game last year with 6 assists, almost 6.5 assists. You know, he's always been he's been like a very good shooter throughout his career, and has led that Memphis Grizzlies team. And not to mention, I really like the defense he plays, but he's one of those more underrated point guards, I'd say, in the league.
I, at number 8, also have Mike Conley. Like you said, he averaged about 21, 6, and 3 last season on shooting splits of 44% from the field, 36% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line. He's the point guard that could maybe take the Utah Jazz over the next step, to the next step, because before their point guards have been like Ricky Rubio, since they've had Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, they haven't really had like a good point guard. Like don't get me wrong, okay, they haven't had a great point guard, and now that they have that, with the top 8 point guard in our opinion with Mike Conley, I believe that especially for the system Utah plays, his defense, playmaking, and reliable jump shot will be enough to maybe give them a push over the edge.
For sure.
At number 7, I had D'Angelo Russell of the Golden State Warriors. Even though he probably won't play point guard this upcoming season, he was listed as a point guard last season, and that's what I based all of this off of. He was able to take that Brooklyn Nets team to the playoffs, averaging 21 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds. His shooting percentage from the field wasn't stellar at 43%. His three-point jumper at 37 is definitely reliable, and he's only 23 years old. There were problems with him earlier in his career, wondering how much of a leader he was, but I feel as though he's matured much since then, and he could definitely be not a number 1 option on a championship team. He could definitely be a good locker room guy at this point in his career, and maybe a second or third option on a championship team.
All right, number 7, I also went with D'Angelo Russell. You mentioned it. He finally took that next step that we've been waiting to see for pretty much ever since after his rookie season. He made a big leap from 15.5 points per game up to 21 points per game. He established himself as an all-star point guard in this league, which is not something easily done. And you mentioned it before. He'll probably be playing more of the two this year with Klay Thompson being out for the Warriors. And who knows if he gets traded or anything like that. But as of right now, yeah, he's probably going to be playing the two. His defense isn't great, but, I mean, his shot-making ability is tremendous. We saw that amazing game against Sacramento where he looked like an elite point guard. And he can just shoot the ball. He's become a way better distributor. And he's a average to above average rebounder, I would say, as a point guard. He's got some good size. I just think that I think he's just trending upwards, and I see him just I just see him as a guy who keeps on improving.
So another thing about D'Angelo Russell, me being a big fan of D'Angelo Russell, I've predicted him to win Most Improved Player the last 2 seasons, and obviously I don't think he will ever reach that goal in his career since he got second place this year, and I don't really foresee him taking a big enough of a jump to get that again. But like I said, he got second in Most Improved Player voting last year, and we shall see how he works in the Golden State Warriors system. So at number 6, I have Ben Simmons, the 6'10" point guard from the Philadelphia 76ers. He is 23. He is only 23 years old and going into his 3rd season in the NBA, and he averaged 17 points, 8 assists, and 9 rebounds, I believe. And he recently came out and said that he kind of fell out of love with the game of basketball, and this summer he fell back in love with the game of basketball. So when I look at that, that means there was a 23-year-old point guard that was averaging 17, 8, and 9 on 56% shooting from the field, even though not many of his shots are of crazy difficulty, that wasn't even fully engaged in the work of basketball, I suppose. He's a great defender for his position, obviously a great rebounder for his position, which may come with the fact that he is 6'10". And at the end of his rookie season, I believe it was, when Joel Embiid went down, he helped the Philadelphia 76ers go on that 15-game winning streak to end out the season.
All right, so number 6, I went with Kemba Walker, and I was debating on putting him, at a better ranking, but I feel like this is about right for right now. He just went to the Boston Celtics after having an outstanding career with Charlotte, or tenure with Charlotte, I'll say, and I believe he's their all-time leading scorer, which is very impressive. And he's a guy that can score. He's another guy like D'Angelo Russell that can just flat out score. He's become a better distributor, but I don't think we've gotten to see how good of a pure point guard he can be, he hasn't really had anyone next to him on his team that he can give the ball to and they can go score. It's always just been him. So I think that's what makes him so impressive. Teams are ready for him every night. They know he's the only one that's going to be able to look to score. And he still comes out and scores. He gets buckets, and I really like his ability to shoot the ball. For his percentage, some might say for a point guard isn't super great, but when I look at the 43.5% shooting, I feel like that's a pretty solid number for as many threes as he takes, and he's a high volume shooter. I don't know if he will be this year going to Boston. He'll have better players with him, so it'll be interesting to see how he fits in with them and if he can be the leader that Boston needs that Kyrie wasn't able to be.
Going back to my number 6 with Ben Simmons, I do believe he'll take Ben Simmons is probably one of my favorite players in the league, probably one of my top 5 favorite players in the league. So trying to throw all the bias out the window, I do believe, though, that he will take the next step in the next couple of seasons, become a 20-point per game scorer, and maybe, potentially, even getting his rebounds or assists up. So, but moving on to number 5, I have Kemba Walker of the Boston Celtics. Like Christian had stated, he was obviously the only go-to scorer on Charlotte. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, it was his birthday the other day. Shout out Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Kemba Walker never really had anyone he could pass the ball to. When you look at his teammates throughout his career, who do you have to think the best player he ever played with? Al Jefferson? Al Jefferson, Jeremy Lamb, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. No disrespect to any of these players, but they've never really been a number 2 option for a contending team, I don't believe. I know that for a fact. But I do expect him to maybe we can see how much if he's a winner with Boston. As we saw with Kyrie Irving, it didn't work out too well when he was in Boston, and we shall see if that was really Kyrie Irving's fault or just how the game goes, I suppose.
All right, so at number 5, I went with Ben Simmons, so it looks like we just swapped on those. It's interesting that you said Ben Simmons said that he had fallen out of love with the game of basketball, which is interesting to me because I believe that's something that every basketball player has happened, but it's something that they don't really admit just because the daily work and all that you got to put into it. So I don't find that as big of an issue as some people might say, but I still find that it's something that might have held him back a little bit from getting extra shots in the gym and improving his jumper, which I do think will improve over time. I still don't think he'll ever be a three-point shooter necessarily, but I think he'll be able to hit a mid-range at some point. It's interesting because he really has not tapped his full potential at all yet, and he's averaging 17 points, 9 rebounds, and about 8 assists with a 56% field goal percentage. Not to mention, I believe he's a very solid defender. And so when people say Ben Simmons isn't very good, they obviously don't really know the game. I feel like Ben Simmons is becoming extremely underrated, and I'm excited to see the step that he takes this year with the Sixers team. And I also feel like it's good that Jimmy Butler didn't come back because that would have hurt his development, I think, because I'd like to see Ben Simmons have the ball.
I do remember watching one game in the playoffs this past season where Ben Simmons was looking more so to score the ball in the first round series against the Brooklyn Nets. And he finished with, it was either 31, 32, 33 points, somewhere in that range. I don't remember for sure, but I remember watching that game, you could really see that he can pretty much do what he wants when he wants, besides hit a jumper, obviously. If he wants to score, he will score. If he wants to play make for an assist, he will get the assist. And he has a great IQ for the game, I believe. And number 4, I have Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets. His attitude problems in the last couple seasons have made me fall more away from being a fan of Kyrie Irving, but that does not affect this list, obviously. He's pretty efficient at 49%, 49% from the field, 40% from the 3, and 87% from the free throw line, with 24 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. I need to see with this Brooklyn Nets team if it was really him that was the issue in Boston, or if it was just a bad environment in general. Because if he can, D'Angelo Russell took this Brooklyn Nets team to the playoffs last season. I believe Kyrie Irving should be able to do the same, if not even take them further. So we shall see if Kyrie Irving was truly the issue there in Boston.
All right, so like you, at number 4, I also went with Kyrie Irving. I've been a huge fan of Kyrie in his game. He's very impressive to me in that I believe he's one of the best under-the-rim players I've ever seen. I believe he's got the best handles in NBA history. He's just ridiculous with the ball, and not to mention, I think his scoring ability is tremendous. He's pretty undersized at only 6'3" as a point guard compared to everybody else in the league. Like when we looked at Ben Simmons, I believe he's a 6'10" point guard. So it just shows you how undersized Kyrie is. But, he averaged 24 points a game last year with 5 rebounds, 7 assists. His playmaking has never been anything tremendous, but at times he's shown flashes of how good of a playmaker he can be. But, he's efficient in his scoring, about 50% from the field. And he shot 40% from 3 this year, which is very impressive. But like you said earlier with his attitude problems, that's pretty alarming to me with this Brooklyn Nets team. I don't know if he can stay with that team long enough and if he can really mesh with them. I'm starting to think that he's more the problem. But again, I'm a huge fan and I like the way that he could score, and he's a very flashy player.
And so now we're entering our top 3 point guards in the league. I'm sure we both have the same players, maybe not in the same order. And at number 3, I have the Portland Trailblazers point guard, Damian Lillard. This past season, he averaged 26 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. Obviously, Damian Lillard had a great first-round playoff series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, but after that in the playoffs, he still played good, but he took a significant step back from the first round. Against Denver in the second round, he still played good, but it was nowhere near the level against Oklahoma City, and then obviously in the Western Conference Finals, getting swept by the Golden State Warriors. Damian Lillard he's a great pure scorer, a solid playmaker, and just a top 15 player in the league, like undisputably. And he is just one of the clutchest players in the league, if I had to say so.
Number 3, turns out I actually also went with Damian Lillard. I think he's probably my favorite player in the league, him or Giannis. But, he's a guy just like Kyrie. He's also listed at 6'3", averaged like 26 points, 4.5 rebounds, 7 assists. Another guy who has shown that he could really make plays. I like his toughness on the court, although he's not a very good defender, but I like the toughness that he brings, and it seems that generates the rest of his team. He's always been great at scoring. He's a very good shooter, and he can hit shots from anywhere. We saw that in the playoffs. We see that in the regular season, and he's extremely clutch, just like how we were talking about Kyrie. Kyrie was another clutch player, but Damian Lillard definitely shows the ability to score, and he's another guy that I say, like, he's a guy that you can count on to be in the lineup pretty much every game for every season. So I find that also very important.
So now entering our top 2 point guards. Actually, before we get in there, one thing I'd like to point out about Damian Lillard is he got locked up by Jrue Holiday in the playoffs 2 years ago. But entering top 2, I would have to say Russell Westbrook is who I have at number 2 of the Houston Rockets. He's my favorite player of all time, but I try not to let bias get in the list. This past season, he averaged about 23 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. The things people nag at him for, typically the most, are his shooting percentage, his shot selection, his turnovers, and the fact that he hasn't got out the first round of the playoffs since Kevin Durant has left the Oklahoma City Thunder. His shot percentages last season were not good at all, but his speed and pace on the court sometimes need to just be slowed down a tad bit. Being a Oklahoma City Thunder fan, I watched many games last season, and towards the end of the game, if he just slowed the game down, it seemed like he was always going 110%. If he would slow down, read the court, I feel like he could be higher up the top players in the NBA list, not up the point guard list, because I believe number 1 is unanimous for point guards. But Russell Westbrook is a great leader, and one thing you can't question is his heart for the game.
Yeah, I also went with Russell Westbrook at number 2. It's just obvious to me. Averaged triple-double 2 years in a row. Some people might say, oh, he steals rebounds. I don't really believe in that. He gets rebounds. And, I think he's a guy who at times can play very good defense. He shows off his extreme athleticism despite the knee injuries he's had. He's shown that he can be the leader of a team, because a lot of people were in question once Durant left if he could lead a team or not. But it shows that he can, and he can take it every game pretty much. So he plays in almost every game, every season, despite all the injuries he's had. He's very tough. He's a tough guy. I'm not a fan of his 3-point shot, but to me, with how good of a player he is, that's not necessarily that big of a deal to me. Although I don't know how he will fit in with this Houston Rockets team. I kind of thought that trade was a trade of desperation for the Rockets. Although I do think he'll be better than Chris Paul. But I don't see him really going with James Harden that well. But I do think the Rockets will still be a solid team in the contender in the West. But Westbrook, I would just like to see him improve his jump shot a little bit. And I still don't think we've seen the best that Russell Westbrook can be, as we see him take a lot of ill-advised shots at times. It might just be who he is at this point, but I'd like to see him with the Rockets, like you were saying, Luke was saying earlier, to slow things down a little bit and maybe get more assists and try to be more of a playmaker.
Number 1, we both, I'm assuming, have Stephen Curry of the Golden State Warriors. It's not even debatable to have him at worst case scenario, have him at number 2 at point guard, but I feel as though it's unanimous that he's the best point guard in the league at this point. Last season, he averaged 27 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. About his impact for the game is off the charts. He can be 7 feet behind the 3-point line, and his defender will still have to be within the realm of him, and that which opens up the inner arc, like the paint, I suppose, up for the rest of the players on the team, which allows Clay, Kevin Durant, and now even D'Angelo Russell to get more shots, and other players that have played throughout the system. Like, he shot 47% from the field, 44 from the 3, and 92 from the free throw line. And he has 3 championships as a point guard. I just feel as though you cannot debate that he is a top point guard in the league.
Yeah, obviously I also have Steph. I don't have to say how good of a shooter he is because he's the best to ever do it. And he's very efficient in how he does it, and he's got the best range in the league, not even close. He averaged 27 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and the only thing I can knock Steph on really is just sometimes he gets a little sloppy, and sometimes you wonder what he's doing. But I mean, that's like the only downfall with him. But everything else, he's a very good shooter, very good scorer, good teammate.
So now that we've finished our top 10 list, I'm just going to, a couple players that I believe that deserve to be mentioned at least. Kyle Lowry of the Toronto Raptors. He was the championship point guard this season. Good player, one of the top charge takers in the league, like offensive foul drawers in the league. John Wall of the Washington Wizards. He has been injured for quite some time now, but when he was healthy, he was a great playmaker, a solid scorer, and a pretty good defender. Jamal Murray, the young point guard of the Denver Nuggets, he's just young. He's gonna get there. He's gonna continue to develop, and I do believe that he will take the next step. Another player I believe that should be mentioned is Chris Paul of the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's been declining the last couple seasons, but his playmaking abilities cannot go unnoticed, and he's just a great ball handler, one of the best playmakers we've ever seen, and a very solid defender. And then the last player, there are obviously many great point guards in the league, but the last player I would like to mention is Eric Bledsoe of the Milwaukee Bucks. They were the number 1 winning team last year in the regular season, and he was the point guard for that team. I feel as though that says enough. And there are obviously many other point guards in the league, like DeJounte Murray, Lonzo Ball, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and many other point guards. So if I'm forgetting somebody, don't come at me. I just would like to shout out a couple other players outside of the top 10. And I believe that's about all we have to talk about in this episode. There has been a recent update that former number 4 pick Josh Jackson will begin the season in the G League for the Memphis Grizzlies. Not that this is monumental news, but when he was coming into the league, I did have high expectations for him. I thought he would be a great player, and it's crazy how only a few years later he's going to be in the G League for the beginning of the season. But I do believe he could still become a solid player, like a good role player, a good bench player, maybe even maybe a serviceable starter for some team down the road. And if that's all we have to say, I suppose we can wrap it up.
All right. If you haven't listened to our first episode, make sure to go listen to that.
In our first episode, we interviewed John Hammond, the general manager of the Orlando Magic. Obviously, this episode may not be as groundbreaking as the first episode, being able to interview the general manager of the Orlando Magic, but we still hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.